Old Lahore has a sound. Not just the honking, not just the call to prayer, something deeper. The scrape of a cartwheel, the slap of sandals on dusty ground, the buzz of life packed so tightly into alleyways that there's barely space to breathe. In the heart of the Gali, where two people can barely pass each other, there's a smell that never really leaves. This is where our story begins. This is the story of Zain. He was born with a voice that felt bigger than the room he lived in. But in his world, big voices don't always mean big chances. Sometimes they just mean people notice you, right before life tests you. And still, somehow Zain kept going. Because even when the Gali tried to swallow his dreams, a part of him refused to disappear. Zain grew up in a one-room house in the oldest part of Lahore. The Gali was so tight that the sun barely reached the ground. The walls sweated in the heat. The nights felt louder than they should because there was nowhere to hide from sound. His mother stitched and sold handmade clothes from their doorstep. Sometimes she'd smile at customers like everything was fine. But Zain knew. He'd seen her hands tremble for a moment after a long day. He'd watched her stare at bills like they were a language she couldn't decode. 4 kids, 1 room, food that depended on the next customer. His father left when Zain was 6. No explanation, no goodbye, just the sudden change in footsteps and the way the home felt thinner. By 10, Zain was running errands, carrying parcels, carrying messages, carrying the small weight of responsibility that should have belonged to adults. By 12, school started slipping away. Not because Zain didn't care, but because caring doesn't fill your stomach. And still, some nights something else lived inside him. On the rooftop, he'd sit with his knees tucked up, watching Lahore flicker with lights like distant promises. The wind up there didn't smell like sewage and stress as much. It smelled like possibility, or at least like escape. That's where the name began. At 12, Zain had a nickname in the Gali, Reformed Magnet, the kind of nickname that sounds half like a joke and half like a hope. He was a Pakistani slum brown boy with stylish, mismatched confidence, clean sneakers when he could manage them, a jacket that fit even when life didn't, hair that he tried to keep neat even when there wasn't time. He was friendly too, the kind of kid who talked to older boys without outacting scared, who made neighbors smile without asking for anything back. When people saw him, they didn't just see a kid with empty pockets. They saw someone with movement in his eyes. Reform Magnet didn't understand the future in perfect words. He just felt it, like music could be an exit. One day, he got access to a borrowed phone. Not his phone, borrowed, like everything important in the neighborhood. Someone played hip-hop for a few minutes, just long enough for Zain to hear something that sounded like freedom. The lyrics weren't fancy. The beats weren't perfect. But the voice behind them carried truth. It talked about growing up broke without begging for pity. Zain listened like someone had finally spoken his secret language. And inside him, a click happened. He went home and started writing. Not in one language, not in proper grammar. He wrote in Urdu, in Punjabi, sometimes mixing both because that's what his life sounded like. Lines about hunger, lines about missing his father, lines about the moment his mother cried in the bathroom where no one could see. His words weren't polished, but they were honest, and honesty has its own kind of power. At night, when the household went quiet, he'd rap softly to himself like he was testing whether the world could hear him if he kept trying. But nobody was listening yet. Not really. They listened to rent reminders, to street noise, to the daily struggle that always got the loudest seat in the room. Zain kept writing anyway, because writing felt like breathing. By 15, Zain fell into the wrong rhythm. Not because he was careless, not because he was bad. It's more complicated than that. In the Gali, there are 2 roads that people see clearly. One road says, work hard, be patient. The other says, if you survive the hustle, you'll eat today. Zain had lived long enough to know patience doesn't always pay. He started small, running packages for older boys in the neighborhood. The work felt easy at first. Fast footsteps, quick errands, no questions asked. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he'd fix everything soon. Then the money came. Suddenly, Zain could buy his mother a new stove, something that didn't rattle like an old engine. He could fix the roof before the monsoon turned their ceiling into a dripping mouth. For the first time, he felt powerful. powerful, like a kid who finally stopped feeling helpless. That feeling was addictive. But power attracts dangers that don't look like dangers at first. Along with the money came karas, cheap hashish that moved through the streets like a rumor. It was offered with casual smiles. It was treated like a small thing, like a break. Zain took one hit just to relax, just to forget the tightness in his chest. Then every night started feeling incomplete without it. One smoke became every hour. Every hour became a habit that took over his mind, his timing, his decisions. The money he was making didn't last because it was dissolving into his bloodstream faster than he could earn it. And the truth is, when you're addicted, your mind starts rewriting reality. Zain promised his mother he'd stop. He promised with sincerity, and then broke the promise with excuses. He lied because he wanted to keep the life he was building while also keeping the escape that was destroying him. His mother noticed. She didn't even need dramatic signs. She just watched. She watched the way his eyes looked different. She watched his energy disappear. She watched him start disappearing more and more, like the boy she knew was slowly turning into someone she didn't recognize. By 17, Zain had been arrested twice. By 18, 3 friends were gone, taken by violence, by bad choices, by the kind of sudden endings that never come with warning. And that notebook he'd kept, his rap notebook, his safe place, his rooftop prayer, he stopped opening for 2 years. Not because the words were gone, because the words felt too heavy when your life was falling apart. Zain was disappearing, not just from his family, from himself. The night everything changed wasn't heroic, it wasn't dramatic, it was just one of those nights where your body and your choices finally stop pretending. Zain was high, stumbling through the narrow streets of his Gali at 3 in the morning. The city around him looked the same. Walls, alleys, shadows, like Lahore doesn't care what condition you're in. He collapsed outside a mosque. A stranger found him. An ambulance arrived. People moved quickly, the way people do when something becomes urgent and real. 3 days later, Zain woke up in a government hospital. The air was cold. The light was too bright. His head felt heavy, like someone had packed it with sand. When he opened his eyes, he saw his mother sitting beside the bed. Her face was older than it should have been. She didn't scream. She didn't lecture. She didn't give him a speech. She just held his hand and cried silently. That silence hit him harder than any shout could have. He tried to speak, but his throat wouldn't cooperate at first. He swallowed and tried again. When he finally looked at the ceiling, he realized how fragile life is, how one wrong night can turn into a lifetime lesson. The doctors told him his body was shutting down. They spoke in careful terms, but the meaning was clear. If he kept going, he had maybe 2 years left. He was 19, too young to feel finished. Lying there, staring at cracked paint that flaked under the light, Zain thought about everything he threw away. He thought about the rooftop. He thought about his notebook. He thought about the boy he used to be, the friendly one, the stylish one, the one who believed that words could make doors where there were no doors. Reformed Magnet used to be a nickname that sounded like confidence. Now it sounded like something he needed to earn for real. He didn't feel like a new person yet. He felt broken, but something in him still refused to die, because the boy who wrote in the dark was still alive somewhere, only barely. Recovery didn't arrive like a movie soundtrack. It arrived like hard mornings, like cravings that show up when your mind is tired, like the feeling that your past is chasing you and you can't just run forever. Zain spent 6 months in a rehabilitation program. The days were structured, the nights were tense. He learned routines that addiction had stolen from him: sleep, food, control. He relapsed once, then twice. Each time he fell, it hurt in a way that wasn't just physical. It was humiliating. It was exhausting. It made him question whether he was even capable of change. But he kept getting back up. The hardest part wasn't admitting he needed help. The hardest part was believing he deserved help. His mother never stopped showing up. Not when it was easy. Not when he was performing recovery well. She showed up when he was messy, when he was afraid, when his progress was slow enough to scare him. During those months, Zain found his old notebook again. The pages looked older than his memory. His handwriting looked like a younger version of him. Reading his lyrics felt like walking into a childhood room after years away. He didn't just remember pain, he saw how honestly he'd captured it. He realized something important. He didn't create his suffering to become a songwriter. He became a songwriter because he survived the suffering already happening to him. So he wrote again, but this time the fire was different. Not just raw emotion, determination. One week he wrote a verse about addiction, what it steals, what it promises, what it takes even when you think you're in control. Another week he wrote about absent fathers, not to blame, but to grieve. Another week, he wrote about the Galis of Lahore and how survival sometimes looks like hustle from the outside and feels like panic from the inside. Some weekends, a local mosque opened its community hall for youth programs. They had basic audio set up for recording, nothing fancy, but enough to let a voice become a real thing. An imam, kind, older, the kind of person who had seen 100 boys like Zayn, gave him permission to record late at night after the programs ended. Zayn recorded his first track on a phone propped against a wall. He didn't have a studio. He didn't have a team. He had a borrowed phone, a quiet room, and words he needed to finally let out. He downloaded a free beat from the internet. He didn't care if it was trendy. He cared if it matched the emotion. He pressed record. When his voice came out, it sounded rough, not like someone pretending to be tough, but like someone telling the truth through a scratchy throat. He uploaded it to YouTube with no big expectations. A week later, the view count hit 10,000. Zayn stared at the screen like it wasn't real, like Lahore's narrow streets had somehow stretched into the whole world. A month later, 100,000. People started sharing it in family WhatsApp groups. Teenagers in Karachi messaged friends. Comments rolled in. This is my story too. I thought I was alone. He speaks the truth. For Zayn, that wasn't just numbers. It was proof. It was the moment his words stopped being private and started becoming a bridge. He kept recording, song after song. He didn't soften the truth to sound more acceptable. He didn't turn his pain into a performance for attention. He made music that felt like a conversation with someone sitting across from him on a rooftop. People started reaching out. A music producer in Karachi messaged him first, then a label in Dubai, then an invitation to perform at a festival in Lahore, the same city that once swallowed him. The scary part wasn't the spotlight. The scary part was remembering the old Zayn and knowing the wrong road is always waiting nearby if you stop respecting your own recovery. But he respected it. Because now he understood the value of second chances. Isn't that life forgives automatically? It's that you finally choose to fight for yourself. The night of Zayn's first concert, the air felt electric. Backstage, he stood still for a second, like his body didn't know what to do with joy after living so long in survival mode. Then he walked toward the stage and looked out. A crowd. Thousands of people. Not all dressed the same, not from the same backgrounds, but united by one thing. His lyrics had found them. Kids from the same streets he grew up on. Mothers who looked like his mother, tired but still proud. Young men with hunger in their eyes, the kind that comes from being told maybe too many times. The crowd started chanting parts of his songs before the music even began. Zayn stepped out and the noise hit like a wave. He walked toward the mic, breathed in, and let the moment settle. He didn't perform like fame was his goal. He performed like gratitude was his goal. He performed for that boy on the rooftop, reformed magnet in spirit before reformed became a fact. The kid who wrote in the dark because it was the only place his thoughts made sense. The kid who almost didn't survive long enough to become the person standing on stage. Before the beat started, Zayn grabbed the microphone and said just one line. I am from the Gali, and the Gali made me. The crowd went wild, because that line wasn't just a statement. It was permission for people who grew up in tight spaces, in hard conditions, in homes where dreams were treated like luxuries. It reminded them that their origin doesn't have to be a trap. Zayn's story wasn't over. It was starting. After the show, he walked back toward quiet streets in his mind. Not necessarily to the exact same alleyways yet, because life changes when you get a chance. But he carried the Gali with him like a scar you're grateful for. A reminder of where he learned what he learned. How to survive, how to hope, how to tell the truth even when it hurts. And somewhere in old Lahore, in a narrow street where the sun barely reaches the ground, a 12-year-old boy is sitting by a wall with a borrowed phone. Maybe he's reformed magnet again, style and confidence held together by hope. Maybe he's writing lines in Urdu and Punjabi. Maybe he's hiding his notebook because he thinks nobody will understand. But now he can, because voices travel farther than the walls of a one-room house. And if you've ever felt stuck, if you've ever thought your future was already decided, remember this. The Gali can try to own you, but it doesn't have to. Sometimes the first step out is a verse. Sometimes the first step out is a late night recording. Sometimes the first step out is one decision to keep going, even when your past is loud. Zayn made that choice, and you can too.